In this video, I want to talk about my reaction to the scandal surrounding admissions into elite private schools, centered around Key Worldwide Foundation and its boss, William Singer. And, this was a fun story. You had this situation where this consulting firm was basically getting paid by wealthy families and semi-famous families to doctor or create uh, resumes for their children who were, basically not, I don't want to say underachieving, but not necessarily elite in their capabilities. And then sometimes with some bribes taking place here and there to get them into elite Ivy League schools. And this is a big scandal, and this is a big cheat, and it's not fair, and blah blah blah. And all that's true, and obviously there are issues with bribery and whatnot. But my reaction to this is that what was done, what Key Worldwide Foundation and William Singer did, is just a microcosm or an abbreviated version of what the families of children who go to Ivy League schools, primarily anyway, most of the children who go, or they're not children, most of the people who go do anyway. And what do I mean by that? It's not a question of we have this vast society and everybody is more or less doing the same things and going to the same schools and having the same upbringing. And then the Ivy League schools look over that entire mass and select based on merit the very best of that entire population and say, of all the people in the United States, you are the most gifted, the most intelligent, the highest achieving, the most remarkable in whatever way. And so you are going to, we will give you entrance into, say, Harvard or Yale, Dartmouth, Brown, whatever. Uh, the people who attend those schools and get in, they have resumes that were tailored for that purpose. It's just that they were built for that going back at least until middle school, if not before. Their parents didn't find a firm necessarily to doctor anything or to create a fake resume. They just started building a resume when their children were in fifth grade or sixth grade, maybe even before. They went to the trouble of getting them into a good school. So some good schools might require them to just move and become in the school district of a good school. They might have to just pay to send them to a good private school. If the places that they want to send them require some kind of metric, some kind of testing, or some kind of academic minimum to get in, they'll pay for tutoring. Uh, they'll put them into sports, right? One of the things that I hear, and this is something I see every day at my gym. It's a really nice gym, and they have a pool, and there's a swim team, and the parents. I mean, I'm sure some of the kids on the team like swimming and enjoy it, and it is I'm not saying it's not worthwhile, like they're learning a potentially useful skill. It's good to know how to swim, and it's nice to discipline yourself and to excel. These are all, qualities. These are virtues in a sense. But in order to become good enough that you are likely to get a scholarship or get noticed by a school, that's not a question of just hard work. Somebody has to pony up thousands of dollars per year, essentially, for you to get private instruction from expert advisors. It's a question of 10 years spending 2 hours a day, 5 or 6 or 7 days a week, if not more, in a pool with somebody who's critiquing you and giving you advice. And it's not just the cost of the pool itself, it's the cost of, can the parents afford to come pick you up? Can they afford to drive you to and from? Can they afford all the equipment? And I'm using swimming as an example because it's one that I see every day. And the reason that parents are willing to pony up five, six, seven, sometimes more $1,000 a year, it's not just because, oh, we love our children and we want them to do something that they enjoy. That might be an element of it, and maybe there are cases where that's the entire point. But most of them are looking at it like, we want our children to excel in some kind of athletic ability thing, whether it's swimming or golf or baseball or whatever, and we are going to structure their time where so much is invested into that by the time that they are juniors or seniors in high school, You know, they're pretty good at it. They're good enough to medal in it. They're good enough to compete in it. They're good enough to get noticed. They're good enough to have that part of the resume filled out. Now, the resume that the Ivy League schools want to create is not a simple one in the sense that, well, you need to have just a good grade on the ACT or a good grade on the SAT or be valedictorian. Those are part of it at best, but they want a broader range of things. But the things that they look for are things that are just very expensive. You know, were you the head of a club or something in high school? Were you head of the robotics team or the astronomy team? Well, most schools don't even have that sort of thing. Uh, and it it's it's cultivation that start it's very interesting because I in my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most people when they're in middle school are not thinking ahead of where do I want to go to college. I really want to get into an Ivy League school. There are some people who might have that ambition, but it's very few. And I think most kids don't really seriously think about college until maybe their sophomore or junior year in high school, and sometimes not even until their senior year. I mean, it's very common. I know with me, I didn't really care or think about it till literally the fall of my senior year when you had to start applying. And if you are at that point deciding, hey, I think I would want to, maybe I want to go to Harvard, maybe I want to go to Yale, because that's prestigious. It's too late at that point for you to uh, build a resume that's going to get you in, unless, of course, your school is the victim of a school shooting and then you become an advocate for gun control who outspokenly speaks against gun rights. And then at the last second, you might be able to bump up your resume greased with the blood of innocent victims. But other than that, no, this is a process that had to have begun many, many years before. And the thing is, the it's not bad that children of rich parents are learning to swim. It's not bad that they are getting lessons to be good at football or basketball or golf. Those aren't necessarily bad things. I think there is a serious question about the development of children and having all of their time managed by their parents, where they have no free time, they have no ability to kind of, limited, I don't want to say no, but very limited ability to develop their own talents, their own desires, their own interests, their own entrepreneurial, and I mean that in the general sense, entrepreneurial in the sense of how they want to spend the time in their life. Um, there's definitely a cost to that that should not be overlooked, and Jonathan Haidt has pointed that out. But the other point here is that these are not virtues necessarily of the kids. These are not indicators that the child has made good choices and has applied themselves. They have shown that they uh, sorry, getting messages. The author of Gym Boys is messaging me. But anyway, I'll get to him in a minute. He has to wait. Um, so the it's not really demonstrating the virtues of the individual student there. It's demonstrating the financial resources of the parents, of the resolve of the parents and the clout of the parents to be able to subsidize. And it's again, I'm using sports as an example because it's part of that, but of having the tutors, of having the classes. I remember Jonathan Haidt, I think when he was on Joe Rogan, mentioned, yeah, you have to go and you have to do some philanthropy. So you have to do some kind of charity that you don't really care about. You're not really necessarily dedicated or interested in philanthropy or helping the poor or whatever it is, but you need to have on your resume that you've done these things because that's what they look for. You need to head up some kind of project. Maybe you become an Eagle Scout. Maybe you organize a litter pickup, whatever it needs to be, and your parents will guide you along those lines to get that to be done. And that's not an indication that the child who was brought up in that way is somehow the most meritocratic, best, smartest, academically gifted, hardest working person out there. It's just not. And what what we need to really understand about these elite universities, especially the Ivy Leagues, is that they're not there to select the best and the brightest. They're not there to train the best and the brightest. They're not there to take uh, regular people or promising people and give them an education that is so superior that it will enhance the value that they can provide to society. So, For instance, you can imagine somebody who's talented, who's smart, but maybe they're not that educated, and they go to Dartmouth or they go to Yale, and they get enhanced, they get magnified and multiplied by some stellar Ivy League education. When they come out of that, they are just ready to enrich the rest of society in a way that they weren't before. That's not what's happening. What the Ivy League schools are, they convey status intergenerationally. You have wealthy elites, especially in New England, especially in Boston, in Connecticut, in New York, in Vermont, in New Hampshire, and Maine, and across the country to a lesser extent, but still very much. Uh, and because we don't live in an aristocracy, a technical feudal society, we don't have a monarchy, we don't have so and so is a baron, so and so is a lord and a duke, and their children are just inherit their titles from them. We don't have that kind of system. We have this republican system in the U.S. that's democratic in a sense and supposed to be egalitarian and all that. And so you can't just go around, and it's very interesting. The elites in the United States, and I think to a lesser extent in the Western world generally, and this I think must have its roots in the Yankee Puritanism of the past. They don't like to be ostentatious. They don't want to act entitled. They don't want to, at least overtly, about their status in their class. They want to have it look like it was earned. I mean, they would like to have it be earned, but if you actually have something earned, there's a good chance that it's not going to go intergenerationally. So what do? You create institutions that have high status, and these institutions are very old, and they have high status, and you have qualifications and entrance requirements and policies that favor the qualities that you can give your children, right? So you can't make your child actually smarter. You can't actually give your child virtue, probably. That's one of the hardest things. I mean, it's almost the nature of virtue that you can't teach it. It's something that needs to be learned through experience and through adversity and overcoming adversity. But you can give them swimming lessons. You can give them basketball lessons. You can give them tutors. You can make them take Spanish classes starting when they're 5. You can pay to get them into a really good school. And they talk about this consulting firm, faking stuff. There's plenty of great private schools that are essentially pipelines to the Ivy League. So the one that I'm the most familiar with, St. Paul's School in New Hampshire, and I learned about that because I met guys from there. And it's true that those schools, and this is also true of the Ivy Leagues, they do actually sometimes go and find people who are truly gifted. They do find people who aren't necessarily wealthy, who aren't necessarily elite, but who are really, really gifted, really, really talented, and not necessarily because they uh, took advantage of a school shooting. And they'll give those people scholarships, and they'll come, and those people will be the veneer. Those people will be the look at so and so. He's brilliant. He speaks 5 languages, and he's super athletic, and he's from a poor family, or he's an immigrant or whatever. And look at him. And that's the veneer. And then inside is a whole bunch of rich kids who look, the Ivy Leagues do tend to have standards, and the more you can pay, the less those standards matter. But most of the people who go to Harvard are not going to be dipshits, right? If you're a total fuck up, you go to Tufts. You don't go to Harvard probably, unless your parents are going to donate a building. Then they'll overlook that. But most of them, they're just average, maybe slightly above average, not necessarily that special. They again, to use these examples, they took swimming lessons for 10 years, and they have some medals, and they maybe won some competitions. They're not Michael Phelps. They're not going to be on the Olympic team. They're not going to be inspirationally good at swimming. They're just going to be a good high school swimmer, or a good high school basketball player, or a good high school water polo player, or what's weird in New England, fucking crew. Crew is not a thing in most of the country, but in New England, if you're on a crew team, and crew teams are lots of guys, you can get a scholarship, and that's something that these schools look for, and it's a big part of their alumni existence and their donors and all that. And if you go to, your average school is probably not going to have a crew. Actually, I guess in New England they do. Some of the average high schools here in New Hampshire do actually have crew teams, but that's an avenue that you can use to get in. But that's not a normal, like, that ability. I'm not discounting it. If you're on if you're a good high school athlete, that's great, and I think it's good to do athletics, and I think it's good to push yourself when those are virtuous in their own way. But I don't think that entitles you to the elite status that a degree from Harvard is going to give you, or from Yale. And that's what you're really getting. The parents are purchasing, if they're doing it legitimately, so-called, it's through tutors and classes and private schools and managing their children's time, cultivating them like a fucking bonsai tree, uh, and creating this resume that's going to fit them into a good Ivy League school. But it's not creating somebody who's actually, relative to everybody else, a better person, a smarter person, a more competent person, right? And in some senses, they're even less because they have been brought up completely under the control of others, completely conforming to the will of their parents, following the strictures of their school. And what really needs to happen is people need to understand that there isn't that much status. They need to demystify the Ivy League schools. This is very, very important. And I know for me, moving to New England has done a great deal towards that end. Meeting guys, because I mean, Harvard and Dartmouth are both within my grinder radius, and I've met many guys from both of them now. I've met guys from Brown. I've been to England. I've met guys from Oxford. I've met guys from Cambridge. And nothing against them as a group. Lots of them are good guys. Lots of them are very smart. Lots of them are hardworking. But none of them impress me as wow, this person is orders of magnitude smarter, better, more capable, more competent than everybody else that I've ever met. Completely not true. I knew people who I was more impressed with their intellect, with their knowledge, with their erudition, at Michigan State. I knew smarter people at my high school. All the people that I've met at Harvard were not as smart as some of my friends in high school who did not go to Harvard. Now, I didn't meet everyone in Harvard, and that is anecdotal, and that's not a proof of anything, except that it is not that the people who go there are that much better than everybody else. Yes, they're better than average. They're better, like better in the sense of like they're not all stupid. They are intelligent more or less, and some of them are very intelligent. And yes, there is that veneer, those show examples who are scholarship, right? They're not necessarily wealthy, and those are the ones they put out like, aha, this is Harvard is the most talented. I keep using Harvard because it's the one I'm most familiar with, or Dartmouth. But there's other little hints that that's what's really going on. I think the most blatant one is the whole legacy program, right? If your parents went to one of these institutions, you automatically get a higher consideration than if you don't have that connection. And that's just blatant. So you can't have a claim that like these are just the most meritorious students around the country, because if two students have equal merit, the ones whose parents went to Harvard are above the ones who didn't. It's that simple. And to what degree, it's not a blank check necessarily. If you're a complete fuck up, if you have really terrible grades, whatever, you may still not go. So it's not necessarily automatic. And of course, you could be pretty dumb, but if your parents are really rich and they're willing to pay, to donate or whatever, they'll let that in. And I can even forgive, and I'm not going to criticize an institution. Hey, we can get millions of dollars that could help the institution, so we're going to accept somebody who's maybe subpar. Sure, I'm not going to criticize them for that, but then everyone else in society needs to realize that that's going on, and that the prestige conveyed by a degree from these institutions need to reflect that reality. We need to understand that this is a conveyance of elite status intergenerationally, not the creation of a meritocracy or a meritocratically elite group of population, because that's not what it is. And I do think that as this elite culture diverges from the wider culture more blatantly, and this is a process that's been ongoing for some time, I think a larger and larger portion of the population is going to look onto them without the same sense of awe and automatic respect and automatic deference that they did in the past. In fact, at least in some circles, they're going to be looked down on. And that's actually not entirely new. I just read a book on Joe McCarthy, and they were saying how how much, like in the 50s, a lot of Catholics really looked down, like on the Eastern elite, the people who went to Groton or St. Paul's School and then on to Harvard or Yale, as you know, the waspish entitled puritanical Yankee aristocracy that is so unbelievably smug about their own moral superiority and their own abilities. Uh, and even though they might have a refined, erudite, um, urban lexicon and manners, and speak transatlantic English, uh, like that doesn't actually make them uh, more competent than everybody else. And then oftentimes that cultural zeitgeist comes with a whole bunch of biases that are actually extremely questionable and negative, and we're seeing that now. We've seen that in the past. So it's just interesting. I'm not that upset about this story because I think that what was done is just a microcosm of what's being done anyway. That's just how these that's just how these organizations operate. Uh, it's just a crystallized form, right? It's the parents who waited too long and said, "Oops, we forgot to get our kid. We forgot to start having them take swimming lessons when they were 5 and make them go." Right? You're making a 5-year-old is not deciding to go to Harvard. I'm sorry, a 5-year-old is not thinking ahead. That's what they want to do, and I'm going to go and I'm going to hit the pool every day because I want to get into Harvard, Yale, or Dartmouth. Um, there may be children, I'm sure that there are, who do actually love, say, swimming or gymnastics or some other sport so much that they do work very hard on it and they do become very good at the end on their own volition, and their parents have supported them. And that's wonderful and that's great. And it is possible that a university could see that and find that appealing and respect that and reward that. Now, I don't think that because you're a good swimmer, that means that you know, you should be in government and you can govern other people and use your degree from Harvard to say, aha, look, I'm super competent and I'm qualified to fucking run the world because I've been taking swimming lessons since I was 5. And because I had a tutor who got me a high grade on the ACT, and because I went to Groton or St. Paul's School, and I was able to write a term paper about um, I don't know, the influence of French on the Basque language during the Middle Ages, which is something that just would not have been an option if I went to, I don't know, Central High School in Centerville, whatever state you're in. Um, but it's not necessarily a bad thing that 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 children of elites are the skills themselves are not bad, the abilities and the skills are not bad, but it is not demonstrating virtue. It's not demonstrating excellence. It's just conformity to the outlines of their parents and their schools and their school administrators. And uh, to take Jonathan Haidt's line, that's actually probably detrimental in the long run. It's actually kind of sad. I don't think, but it's also, whether or not you agree with that, it's not grounds to assume that they are hyper competent, that they're hyper you know worthy of the status that they're going to get from by virtue of going to these schools. So two good books on this: Privilege, which is about St. Paul's School, one of the most elite um, private schools in the United States. I was just watching CNN the other day actually, and they were doing a biography on Mueller. This was in the lead up to the Mueller report coming out, and they were just kind of upping the pedigree of Robert Mueller and how he's such a great prosecutor and investigator, and how Trump's really going to get it. But they showed a picture of him. They said he attended private school, and they showed him in a hockey uniform, black and white picture, St. Paul's School, which for those of you who don't know, it's in Concord, New Hampshire, and that's where John Kerry went. J.P. Morgan went there. It's an elite private school, and again, I got introduced there because I've hooked up with guys who go there or went there, and having talked to them, they will confirm exactly what I'm saying here. It is a prison for one. I've talked to some of the ones I know there were the really smart kids from working class families that were just very, very, very academically inclined and impressive in terms of their physical abilities, and they got scholarships to go. But most of them were just rich kids whose parents pack them off there, make them go, and They don't really have a say in the matter. And yet they're going to get rewarded at the end, probably by going to either Harvard or Yale, maybe Dartmouth. And if they are in the bottom of the class, they'll have to settle for Brown. And that's not because of any great virtue or character on their part or any great achievement on their part. Um, in fact, almost nobody ever fails at St. Paul School. It's so expensive that they have if you start having a problem, their counselors would come and sit you down like, what do we need to do? What needs to happen to make this work? And that's just the level of attention and investment that your average person's not necessarily going to get. Um, Sometimes you don't have to be rich to get that, right? If your parents are not wealthy, but they are that interested in that able, that willing, that motivated, you can make it happen. There are poor people who can achieve the same things as rich people. It's just much more difficult. It can be given. It can be given to a rich elite person. It can just be given. They just have to show up and it's going to happen. For a poor person, it is possible, but it is much harder. They actually have to work on it. And then what we are then told is where there's a bait and switch where the person who actually worked really hard and who actually had to overcome a lot of adversity, right? The person who is just as good a swimmer but could never afford swimming lessons and was sneaking in the YMCA every day and watching YouTube videos. That's fucking impressive. All right. The person who goes every day and works, yes, they showed up every day and their swim instructor gave them classes and they were on a team and everyone else on the team was just as rich as they were and they never had to have a job because their parents could pay the whatever it costs. That's good. I don't fault them or say that they suck because that's not necessarily the case at all. But they just showed up and you go for the ride and it's all set up for you. It's all lined up for you versus the person who didn't have it all lined up for them and had to work very hard. Uh, Even harder, right? Because maybe they had to have a second job. Maybe they had to stay up late. Maybe they had to go to Burger King or McDonald's or whatever before practice or after practice, and it's to afford to go, or they couldn't go to the classes, and they had to. I mean, Serena or Venus Williams kind of famously, they couldn't afford tennis lessons, so they got a book and they just practiced with a book. Though, that's an impressive feat. And so you're taking like this salting or this peppering of these really impressive academic people, and then you're kind of putting them on a big glob of mashed potatoes and saying, haha, look how hot these mashed potatoes are. Yeah, well, I don't know if that's the best analogy, but anyway, it's just important for us to realize that these institutions are conveying status intergenerationally. That's been their primary goal for a long time. I don't want to say it's their only function. They do have other functions. They spread other kinds of ideology. They do perform an educational function. I'm not saying that they don't do that at all. They just think that we need to understand that that's not their primary focus, or at the very least, not their only focus. And their status and their renown in our society should reflect that. They should be not as revered as they are. The problem is that all the other institutions that are not them aspire to be like them in most respects. And so even if you are not afflicted with the undying urge to go to Harvard or Yale, then the normal school that you do go to, if you assume to go to school at all, everyone there is going to be trying to emulate and copy and be like those Ivy League schools. I remember where I went to Michigan State. I definitely got that impression that they had an Ivy League envy problem, and I think that that's pretty common, and that definitely needs to change. We need to understand that it's for rich kids primarily, and it's for them to have status, to earn. They can't be given status, so they earn status, but it's all laid out for them so that status is not earned in the traditional. These are not the people who rise to the top uh, through their own merit. They're people who are guided to the top through the investment of their parents and their schools, and it's that in and of itself is not evil. Again, I don't want to say that they're bad people for doing this or that they're necessarily victims, although they are victims in the sense that their lives are not their own to a large extent, that they are cultivated kind of like there is some evidence here. There's some writings on this that parents use their children as a status symbol. When you go and visit your friends, when you go out to dinner with your friends, when you socialize with your friends, you want to say, oh, Billy is going to Harvard. You don't want to be the guy who goes, oh, Billy went to Tufts. And they're like, oh, Billy went to Tufts. Yes, they have good parties there. No, you want to, and it can be even more than that, where it's not just that you went to Harvard. It's did you get into this fraternity? Did you get into this program? Oh, and I'm using Harvard, but it could be Dartmouth, it could be Yale, whatever. And the children are just an avatar. This is common. We get this, with the hockey dad or the hockey mom who's enraged and living vicariously through the athletic exploits of their children. This is a broader issue, and it's not something that's restricted just to the elites, obviously, right? I mean, it's kind of even a trope that the redneck dad is reliving his high school glory days that are long past him through his son, and he's puts all this pressure on him to fucking whatever. And that is a really dangerous and sad kind of social reality that just happens all too often. And the difference there is when the poor guy does it, his son is just kind of disgruntled and on the football team. But when a rich person does it, their kid is going to go to Harvard. And so the one of them is going to have a bad knee and a whole bunch of he's going to peak in high school maybe, and the other one is going to go to Harvard and roommate with the future head of Google or whatever, and live this elite life and think that they fucking earned it themselves because they got into a really good school and they got a degree from there. So, and a lot of it is to convince the kids. This is definitely true in St. Paul School. And if you ever read the book Privileged about St. Paul School, a lot of it is to indoctrinate the kids to believe you've earned it. You've done this. This is difficult. This is elite. There's only one St. Paul school in the whole country, and there's only a handful of other private schools that are in the same category, which is true. They're in the same category. Now, that category is not the best of the best of the best. It's the richest of the richest of the richest. But because you're here, yes, it's true. Maybe you are from a rich family, and yes, they're paying $30,000 or $50,000 a year for you to go here for your tuition. But really, you're getting good grades, and these are hard classes. Normal kids will not take, Latin, let's say in high school. They'll not take they won't be on a robotics team. They won't have to play a sport. Everyone at St. Paul School has to play a sport, and they won't be on a crew team, and they won't blah blah blah. And that's going to rationalize in the kid's mind, hey, I really am hot shit. And then they apply to Harvard and they get in, and like a third of the people from St. Paul School will go to Harvard, and a third of the other ones will go to Yale. There is a pipeline there that is as real as the bribery one that William Singer was providing for, consulting for his wealthy patrons. And very few people who go to St. Paul School don't graduate from there. So it's and then you go to Harvard and you're like, hey, I went to Harvard and now I'm a genius. And you meet somebody who didn't go to Harvard and you're like, oh, that's so quaint. You didn't go to college, or you went to Pennsylvania State, or wherever, University of Ohio, blah blah blah. Oh, that's nice. Well, you, you're not near as woke as I am, because I was super elite and I earned that, and you never could have done it. But anyway, those are my thoughts on that. I've made videos to this effect before, but since it's come up in the news again, I thought it was time to cover something other than gun control, as much as I feel inclined to do that. But anyway, I will talk to you all later. Have a good day. Bye-bye.